Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Vintage Books Live. I'm very excited tonight to have Rimona Eskayo here to talk about their book, I'm Having Top Surgery. I have to give a little bit of background. I actually hit Rimona up on social media for the book because I had seen it. One of my other folks that I follow had posted about it. And I was so excited to see it in the world because it's a subject that it's sort of addressed it generally in some of the books that we carry, but it's not addressed from such a personal point of view, and it's not addressed as thoroughly, I think, as Ramona's book does. So I'm going to start out with my usual question, which is, tell me the story of how this book came to be.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I started working on this book in 2019, a few months before I had top surgery. It basically started out as a zine, and it's a self-published book, so it is a book length, but it also has this roots in independent publishing. Yeah, so my original idea was it was just going to be a 16-page zine. I'd been living in rural Central California for a year prior to 2019 when I had top surgery. So it was just a really hard place to access information and community, knowing that this was a procedure I was trying to have. So yeah, I was really feeling like I was staring into the void of the resources that I was looking for. And I was also simultaneously trying to think about how I would want to explain this decision to my loved ones in a way that would, give them the necessary information, but wouldn't be quite as invasive and would help me tell my story the way that I wanted it to be heard.
Yeah, I'm researching some of that. I won't say too much because it's part, family member, and I don't want to tell more of their story than I have, license to tell. But we've been doing some research about another different procedure and running into similar things, even though there's this part of the world is, in general, a little bit more supportive environment. It's still very hard to access some kinds of information that you kind of want to know before you go into a situation like this. So then that was one of the reasons why I was so excited to see it, because I think there's a lot of we have several books that we carry that addressed a lot of the emotional factors, and they address just generalities, but not the sort of more specific, well, how should you prepare and how do you take care of yourself afterwards? And, so I know you took the self-publishing route, which I think for this particular work was fabulous, but I know also that involves taking on all the roles of the publisher. So the design and the layout and that sort of thing, I think probably came more naturally given the rest of your background, which we can touch on in a minute. But it's also the marketing and finding a printer and stuff. So I'm curious, in that whole process, what ended up being the sort of most foreign, difficult part for you in the journey of being your own publisher, in addition to being the writer and the illustrator?
Yeah, I think that's a fun question. We can talk about this more. I did study art in school, but I am a self-taught designer and illustrator. I studied sculpture. So I think this project, since it's gone on for the last couple years, it's been a lot of learning. And the way that the book now looks is very different than when I started it, just like the illustrations, doing digital illustration. And I did print the book myself at a community publishing center in Portland called the Independent Publishing Resource Center, the IPRC. So I definitely think the printing process was very new to me. And taking something digital and making it into print is just a new
Yeah.
process
Yeah.
for me. And specifically with my book, I have a copy right here.
Yay.
People can know what we're talking about. The print process that I use is called risograph. And you can kind of see it allows you to print in color, but it's really economical for a single color print. And it's just kind of, the machines are really finicky, and a lot of them are like from the 80s. And they just
That was
like
a while
physically
ago.
break a lot. Yeah. Um,
Yeah. We
so
won't say
it's,
how long ago.
yeah, it's just that part was very challenging. And just deadlines are very hard for me. So
Yeah.
I finished it in 3 years, but it was, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And another thing I'll say too is
Yeah.
the project is partially funded by a grant from the Regional Arts and Culture Council. So definitely having funding in order to have the time and to pay for materials was, yeah, essential.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Talk about the design process a little bit. Like, what did you think about when you were doing that? Because that's one of the things that I actually really enjoy about it, is that the way you chose to present the information and the call out quotes and how you chose to like lay them out on the page and stuff. I think is really fun.
Thanks. Yeah, you know, I think a lot of it is like it's really a personal project and kind of a reflection of the way that my brain like processes information. But I really think that it's important for especially medical information to be more accessible, and not just like in the way that like the words that we're using, but in a visual sense as well. So a lot of the book is kind of paced between like short essays and more visual elements. And it's not exactly like a graphic narrative, like it's not like a comic book,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would say like more illustrated book. Um, yeah, and I think that the design is like really oriented around trying to make this um as not scary as possible.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
when you tell people that you're gonna have any kind of like gender affirming surgery, I think the idea of surgery can be very scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a lot of it is like just kind of around, like there's a lot of like kind of organic shapes and plays on like stitches and staples and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that it's the way you took the, I mean, it's a very serious, very emotional, very, sort of momentous topic, and yet you took it, and dense too, right? Like all the medical information, what you get from the doctor's office, and you're just like, oh my gosh. But I think just the way you took that and made it, there's just enough whimsy in it that it takes that sort of scariness away. And I definitely think that you achieved that. And now I can't see what I wrote, so I'm gonna be like, eh. um I am I'd like to switch to talking a little bit more about the process itself and going through the surgery and stuff. And I think that with a lot of the rhetoric that's going on right now in the country, there's a lot of misunderstanding. I think even probably among people who are generally supportive about how the process works. I know that because there's so much misinformation going on, there's sort of this implication that, people are accessing this just willy-nilly, and we have to, protect people and stuff. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the process that you have to go through, when you make a decision like this for yourself. Like, you come to this really momentous decision for yourself, but then getting from that point to the point that you're actually having surgery is
Mhm.
pretty significant. And there's a lot that goes on, that has to go on, on the sort of that the formalizing in the medical process. Could you talk a little bit about what people actually have to go through between the point that they're like, I think I want to do this, and when an actual surgery happens?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I'll say maybe that the process looks different for everyone. It's definitely dependent on where you live. And just like for a lot of people, like access starts with just knowing that this is possible and that
Hmm.
this kind of care exists. Um, so I'll say just like work with a lot of trans youth and like talk to a lot of trans youth about the book, and like just the existence of social media is like different than when I was like
Yeah.
15. So there are tons of 15-year-olds out there who are like able to access this information, and then are able to, come through that process of making the decision. I would say like there's a section in the book that's called waiting. And I would
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
that pretty much sums up the process really well. Is it's really long and it's really slow, pretty much no matter where you live.
Yeah.
And sometimes the waiting is just, yeah, that processing. A lot of people, especially trans youth, like are really part of the waiting is getting like that support from their networks of parents or friends. And like, it's the kind of thing that you really do want to have a support network for, just in terms of logistically the
Yeah.
process of getting the surgery, but also like there's a level of importance in other people like supporting your decision and understanding like how this is going to make you freer. um I'm a little bit rambling here, but
Okay. No, I was
yeah.
thinking more of the, I mean, nothing that everything
Yeah,
that you said is really important too, but I was thinking more of the like the formal process of getting approval, going
yeah,
through the medical system,
yeah,
all of
yeah,
that too. So
totally. Yeah. Yeah, it does depend on where you live. Something that's good to know about is this thing called the W Path. It's
yeah.
the World Professional Association of Transgender Healthcare. And they pretty much set the standards. It's called standards of care for a lot of forms of gender affirming care. And that's an international organization. I talk about it in the book. It's really, a Eurocentric um, organization steeped in white supremacy. So there's just a lot of gatekeeping, even though it's like an organization that's setting the standards of care for like us to access like life-saving critical care. There is a lot of gatekeeping in it. And you can see that as the standards of care have changed over time, how restrictions have changed. And um, so there's like, for example, in the past, you used to have to be on testosterone for a year before getting top surgery. And now it's not a requirement to be on testosterone before getting top surgery, because you don't need to be like have a body that is rich in testosterone in order to like want a flat chest.
Right. Right.
So the standards of care right now require a letter from a therapist, and I have a sample letter
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
book from my therapist. They weren't actually someone I was working with, but I just literally paid them for the letter. And that's really common, and a lot of people can get that for free through like trans health clinic. I just didn't have access to that at the
Yeah.
time. You have to also have a primary provider. Sometimes you need a referral to a surgeon from your primary provider. And in my case, that's what I needed, because my surgeon, if you're familiar with Kaiser at all, you have to
Yeah.
have all of your providers in within the Kaiser network. So it really depends on where you live based on there, but
Yeah.
usually it's kind of a combination of like this therapist letter, the primary provider, and then the surgeon.
Yeah.
So once you get the letter, then that's when you would get insurance approval, if it can be covered by insurance. Um, And that could be before or after you have a consultation with a surgeon. Um, or, like when you decide which surgeon you're going to work with, there's usually some delay in just insurance approval. And
Yeah.
often, like how the standards of care are used now through WPATH those are like the things that insurance companies look for in order to approve or deny coverage. So that's kind of like another element of the
Yeah.
gatekeeping.
Yeah.
I'm
No,
getting a
I
little
mean,
more detailed now, but that's kind of like the initial landscape of like getting from like your decision to like the
yeah,
surgeon.
yeah,
And then there's a lot more details in the book too about
yeah.
a
No,
lot
and
of steps
I
along the way.
think it's just, I wish that people would understand it's not it's not a snap decision for anybody,
Yeah.
because there are so many hoops that you have to jump through and time, so you might make a decision and the surgery might not happen for a year or more. So it's definitely not a situation where people are like, I'm just gonna, go in and, have this done because I'm feeling this way this weekend. And, it's a very considered, careful decision that a lot of people are questioning as you go along. And for better and for worse. I mean, it's good to think about your reasoning and stuff for anything that you do, but sometimes I think you called it gatekeeping, and I think there's definitely an element of that as well, where people are like, well, you have to meet this criteria, you have to meet this criteria, and it gets a little overwhelming, I think, for most people.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that there are some people who have a lot of certainty. And I think there's also there's someone who's featured in the book. There's features of 5 different trans
Yeah,
people just
yeah,
talking about their experience. And they talked to me about just I was just like, I'm just gonna try this. I'm gonna do this step. Like it just kind of depends on your relationship to
yeah,
it and how supportive other people are towards you. Like I wish it was faster. I don't think that trans people need to wait like multiple years
yeah,
sometimes in order to
exactly.
get care that is, um, life-saving. So
Yeah,
I think there's a page in the book that is kind of more illustrative and it just says, this is about autonomy. And
yeah,
my main takeaway would be, that trans people know our bodies best. And, when cis women are having breast augmentations, no one is like, well, are you sure? In the same way that
exactly,
especially if you're a
exactly.
trans woman having a breast
Yeah,
augmentation, you're
yeah,
going to be experiencing that socially, but also at the
yeah,
doctor.
exactly. No, I agree. There's a lot more. It amazes me, honestly, how much gender affirmation just happens as a normal part of our lives for cisgender people, in the sense that we don't even identify it as such, as gender affirming. We're just like, well, that's just the thing that people do. And we don't really recognize that there's all these options available that are just as gender affirming to cisgender people, as people who are trans are asking for their own autonomy and their own selves. And so I just it's pretty amazing to me how unreflective sometimes I think that people can be when they, and in not drawing the parallels between, what's the cisgender experience, what are the parallel things that cisgender people do for themselves, for anywhere from doing their hair the way they want to do it. And, like you talked about cisgender women having breast augmentation, having hair removal, having, other surgeries that, that make you feel like the way you want to feel. I mean, and that's basically what trans people are doing, is they are when they want their bodies to feel the way they feel at home in them. And it's really not a very complicated concept,
Yeah,
but we seem to be making it such
yeah,
today. So
yeah.
I gotta read my paper again. Um, what, when you were So we talked about like the lead up to the process. And I guess what was the thing that you were worried about the most going in? And did that end up being the hard thing that you thought it might be, or were there something different that was either hard or good, something good that you didn't expect to be good? Like, how did your actual experience compared to maybe what you anticipated it being ahead of time?
Yeah, I think my biggest fear was that it was going to get canceled. If you get sick before having surgery, it gets canceled. This was I got my surgery like before the pandemic was declared, so but also COVID was still going around at that point.
Yeah.
So
Oh my gosh, I'm sure that got dicey.
um
Ah,
so yeah, you just have to be really careful. You like can't, I don't smoke nicotine, but like there's a lot of things that you have to do in preparation, and I was just, I think, anxious for the lead up.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I was incredibly happy when I came out, even though I was just like in had just been operated on.
yeah,
So like I think I am just, if you read the book, you will discover that personality trait of mine is just being very thorough. So I did a lot of planning and preparation ahead of time, a ton of research, talked to a lot of people. And so like I think that I was able to work through a lot of my anxieties around like the
yeah.
actual logistics of like incisions. And I had a surgeon who I really trusted and like a main nurse who I really trusted as
Oh,
well.
that's great. Good. That makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
What was the most unexpected source of joy? I mean, I think, there's the obvious source of joy that your body looks and feels more like how you want it to, but was there something present for you that you maybe weren't expecting that was just like, "Oh my gosh, this is so great."
That's a fun question. Yeah. I I'm a runner. And
Ah.
yeah, running since I was 14. So I think just like the experience of running for me was just like having a flat chest makes me feel like free on a
Yeah,
basic level. But I think like being able to run and have a flat chest in like the way that I always wanted my body,
yeah,
it's like
yeah.
just feels like, yeah,
That's amazing.
ultimate
I love that.
freedom.
I think that's one of the things that I wish more people could see, could see and really receive, because I think a lot of times when people get ideas about something, it's really hard for them to receive anything other than their preconceived notions. And I wish that more people could see the joy, because I think that that's the thing that I just love to see when I go through content on TikTok or Instagram and I see people who have maybe recently gone through surgery, or just that joy of finally feeling and looking maybe in some way that they really want to, and just having that be, it's like infectious. It's just so wonderful. And I wish people could really take that to heart and understand how important it is, because it's just so it's just wonderful. I just love to see accounts where, there's a couple people I follow on Instagram that they had, I started following them before they had their surgery, and then they had their surgery, and it was just the most amazing thing, because it was, watching the recovery and watching how joyful they feel about it. And just like every time there's a post, and I mean, that what's presented on social media is curated and not every day, and there's hard things. And I know that anybody who's on Instagram as a trans person is getting all kinds of garbage as well, but it's still just really, really fun to see how affirming and how wonderful they're feeling because of it. So let's see. Is there any, just from a medical standpoint, what was recovery like?
Yeah, there's a section in the book about recovery. I think it's really different for everyone. There's also a lot of folks in the like interview section where they talk about their different experiences with
Yeah,
recovery
yeah,
because the main part of recovery is like 10 days to 2 weeks, but it is pretty much like a month long, like,
yeah, yeah,
your restrictions on activities are usually lifted after a
right.
month.
Well,
Um,
and some of it seems like it goes a lot longer even than the
yeah,
initial restrictions. And
yeah, like weight. My job at the time, after I had surgery was like being a baker. So that's like a lot, like I couldn't lift the bags of flour and
right, right.
yeah. Um, yeah, I'm trying to figure out what else I could say about recovery. Um, I think there's like a lot of in the featured interviews, there's someone who talks about having a complication and what that experience was like, which I think is really important for folks to
Yeah,
know about, just not to just be afraid of, but to understand that it is
yeah,
possible and
yeah,
things that you can do to like try to prevent that and steps you can take if it happens. Um, there's, I think like a large just part of recovery is it's a huge physical change. And so I
yeah,
think it can just be emotionally challenging, even if like physically things are going okay.
yeah, yeah,
Another person talks too about like just like how the physical and emotional are connected.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, I think that in just in terms of access, another huge factor in like how recovery goes is like what kind of support that people are able to have.
right,
Um,
right.
and I also like kind of provide some suggestions on like planning and how you can find people. There's some really great programs like at OHSU, they have a volunteer program where you can like get support from other trans people. And they also,
Oh, cool.
there's also some places, I'm not sure if it's available for
I'm
top
writing this
surgery
down.
specifically. Yeah, they have an amazing volunteer program. But they have at OHSU, they also will have like some places to stay after recovery. A lot of people, especially like in states that aren't as don't have as good of healthcare for trans people, will like come from out of state. So that's really
Yeah,
nice
yeah. That's
uh,
very cool.
as well, especially if you're coming to like a city that you don't live in. It's just really hard to find that support. So
Yeah, yeah.
um, yeah.
What was the emotional process like? Because I know that even though you're doing something that you're very confident that you want to do, and there's really no question about that, sometimes your brain, in that you talked about that emotional and physical being connected, and sometimes your brain can be like, oh my gosh, what the heck? Even when you're like your conscious sort of deliberate brain is very confident that this is what it wants, but sometimes I think when you were recovering from something, our unconscious brain is saying something different. And how did you deal with that process? And again, obviously that's going to be also different for everybody, but did you have stuff that you kind of had to work through when you were recovering that was just kind of hard emotionally, um maybe even unexpectedly hard?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's kind of, it's an intense process.
Yeah,
It's not like you can just kind of resume your life immediately after having surgery. Like, I was like icing
yeah,
15 minutes every hour and like um it changes like your energy levels and like taking like pretty intense pain medication in the very beginning. So I think that definitely just it has an emotional impact.
yeah, yeah,
Um I definitely found it a little bit, you have to sleep on your sitting up. And so that is just like very challenging for me.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think something that I'll maybe talk about like a few points that are, I know, like pretty common for other trans folks, is just like the idea of drains. I think speaking more
Yeah.
to like
Yeah.
fear too. So for anyone who doesn't know, when you have top surgery, oftentimes they'll insert a drain, kind of on the, like right underneath the skin,
Yeah.
where the
Yeah.
incision was. And it basically uses like a very simple like vacuum technology to draw fluid away from the incision. And it
I
reduces
think
swelling.
that's used in other gender affirming surgeries as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know it's used just like in surgery in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think like specifically, um, things that can be challenging for trans people is that you have to wear like a compression um vest, which can be like kind of reminiscent of a binder. And so people who have
Yeah.
used binders are like, I did this so I wouldn't ever have to wear a binder again. And then it's like just kind of where it is on your chest is like can be uncomfortable and itchy. And then you also kind of have to see the fluid because you're emptying the fluid.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think that can be like emotionally intense for, especially for squeamish people. And then I think probably something that was like a source of stress for me as well, that I know is stressful for other people, is that if you get uh your nipples put back on your body. I'm trying to remember the word, for some reason it's escaping my mind.
Yeah. No, I don't
Oh, a
remember
nipple
either.
graft is what it's
Yeah.
called. If you get a nipple graft, it can, there's like some different factors that can result in it not taking to your body. And so your nipples can fall off. And the like nurse was just like very honest with me about like, this can happen. This is what you can do to try to prevent it. So that was just like very stressful because
Yeah. Yeah. I would think so.
yeah. When you look at your chest after surgery, it doesn't look the way that it's going to look like for the
Right.
rest of your life. It
Right.
looks bruised and like
Yeah.
you just
Yeah.
had surgery because you did. So
Yes.
yeah, I think the physical part can be like scary for
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. It is. It is. I think anytime there's something, I think our brains, like our animal brains, kind of know if something feels really off about our bodies, like visually. I mean, this is completely unrelated, but also not. Like I remember after I had my daughter, same, it was just like, oh my God, what's happening down there? It looks so wrong. And I would imagine that there's some, I think honestly, probably anybody who undergoes any kind of very significant surgery, there's
Mhm.
probably that sort of upset feeling in the back of your brain going, this is not good. And
Yeah, it's a
so yeah,
huge thing to just be like, in one moment your body looked one way and another moment it looks another way, even if that's like what you really want.
right,
And
right.
like that is overwhelmingly how people feel after surgery, is just very happy and clear about their decision.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me, I think I asked you this in the store, but I'll ask you for purposes of the interview so we can hear it. You have other plans to write other books about similar topics related to gender affirming surgeries or any other part of the experience. And, and to set them up in a similar way that you set this book up in.
Yeah, I think I told you about a project that's a little bit temporarily on hold right now. I have been planning a project that's more about like healthcare for trans youth in general, not just like top surgery. And I have that project kind of outlined, but it's on hold right now for funding purposes. My
Yeah.
funding fell through. So yeah, that if anybody who's watching this wants to
Yeah.
be a funder. I've also I I'm also kind of exploring a potential future project around like anatomy diagrams that are trans inclusive.
Oh,
Um,
that's very cool.
and I think some of the direction that my work is taking is thinking about like what kind of like graphics we need for classrooms
Yeah.
that can be more reflective of trans people's experiences.
Oh, that is super cool. What do you do, what I guess we call it day jobs. Writers have day jobs. Do you have I are you working on, because you do design and illustration in your day job as well. Is that
Yeah.
Are there projects that you can talk about for that, or is that more like just for companies or whatever?
Yeah, I also do freelance design and writing. I used to be a creative director at a brand agency in Portland as my day job. I sort of ended that right as my book production was ramping up because I just needed the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, so I help brands like write taglines and make logos and stuff. And I think it's really fun because
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
love
that's so
design,
cool.
but I'm also a substitute teacher in Portland.
Oh,
Um,
very cool.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's actually it's a really interesting and good mix, I think. You said that you also work with trans youth. Are there organizations that you work with?
Yeah, I through this project I've worked with like a lot of trans youth and led some workshops. I actually got a second grant through Regional Arts and Culture Council for to do a workshop series probably this summer. And I really love it's called SMIRC, but it stands for Sexual and Gender Minority Youth Center, I believe. Um, it's kind of a long acronym,
Yeah, that's
but
okay.
they're really awesome and they serve a lot of trans youth and a lot who are houseless
Okay.
specifically.
Yeah,
But they have
yeah.
a lot of drop-in hours and they do really awesome programming. And I just really love the folks there. I've also done some work with Planned Parenthood's Teen Council, and I've led some workshops at Portland State University's Queer Resource Center for they had a trans month of action in November. So that I led a couple workshops for them. And then I'm also like leading some other workshops for other organizations, one at the IPRC, the print center that I am part of later this month. And I'm also part of a panel actually next week
Awesome.
as
Good.
yeah, about trans healthcare. So that's kind of where I get to meet a lot of trans youth. And then I also like people really connect to me over email and Instagram and
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
after they read the book. So that's really fun too.
Yeah, that's very awesome. Now, tell me again the name of that organization with the long acronym in case people want to reach out, support it, or
Yeah.
volunteer or
Um,
whatever.
it's called um usually, oh yeah, Sexual Gender Minority Youth Resource Center. It's kind of it's under the umbrella organization of New Avenues for Youth. Um, the other organization I'd probably like if anyone wants to make a donation or anything, I'd suggest Black and Beyond the Binary Collective.
Okay.
They're a most of my books are sold as a fundraiser for them. So
Okay.
it's usually 25 to 40%.
Yeah. No,
So the
I
book
that one
is-
I have heard of. I think there's one other
yeah.
one in Portland, and I will try to post it when I post the in the comments when I post the video tonight, because I know there's one other place in Portland that does a lot of work with trans youth. So I'm gonna like be old and peer at my thing again. I think there's one question that I would close with, and I'm just really curious in the face of everything that's going on that can just be so overwhelming and depressing. And I know I can get myself into like scrolling loops at night, and there's one loop after another that's just very overwhelming, and that's as a supporting person, not as a person who's actually experiencing this directly. And I'm wondering, like, how do you personally sort of maintain your joy and your peace, and trying to hold on to the good things that are around you when there's all this hard stuff that's happening and all these sort of attacks from all these different sides. So I guess ultimately it's a self-care question. How are you maintaining what you need to be able to do the things that you're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking that. I think for me, it's really wrapped up also in the pandemic and just understanding that COVID is still like out there being totally
Yeah,
unmitigated and that it's like really does impact trans people and trans people of color, especially just in the fact that we're usually underemployed, usually living in poverty, often living in poverty with unstable housing, especially for trans women of color experiencing so much violence, incarceration, and the pandemic just really exacerbates all of those things that are already existing. So I think for me, like having a lot of just loved ones who are trans, is yeah,
yeah,
very much
yeah,
life-giving, and, um, I don't I also think that, like, just meeting trans youth for me, and being able to be, like, an educator and, like,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
you don't need to listen to any of these bigots because, like, everything that you're doing it is perfect and, like, I think, it's our role as adults
yeah,
to protect trans youth. And I think part of that is just being like, you don't need to change yourself. Like,
yeah,
um, and just like gassing people up, making other people feel
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's what I keep holding on to is just, okay, this is all terrible. What are you going to do about it today? And not because all you can do is what you're going to do today,
Mhm.
and going out and doing something to make things better each day and kind of holding on to that. And, other support
Yeah.
structure like you. All right. Well, thank you so, so much for being with us tonight, and definitely keep us posted on your projects because
Yeah.
we'll definitely want to have more of them in the store when they come out. And so just as a reminder to everybody watching, Ramona's book is at our store and you can purchase it there. And as she said, the book, some of the sales are going to support Black and Beyond the Binary. So I think that's honestly really cool because you can learn something about another person's experience, or if you are trans and are wanting to know about somebody else's experience in your decision making process, or how deciding what you want for your own life, but you can be supporting other people at the same time, and so that's really great. So thank you again, Ramona, and we will hopefully talk to you soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Have a
Have a
good night.